I'll never forget the moment I realized my home was turning into a battleground. I had just wrapped up a brutal 12-hour night shift at the hospital, where I work as a floor nurse. Exhausted and aching, all I could think about was collapsing on the couch for a few hours of sleep. My back throbbed, the kind of deep ache that crawls up your spine and refuses to let go. But as I turned onto my usually quiet street that morning, I slammed the brakes. There it was, a silver SUV, parked squarely in the middle of my driveway. At first, I assumed it had to be an emergency. Maybe a car broke down or someone needed a quick stop. But there was no note, no neighbor nearby, no sign of urgency, just that SUV parked like it owned the place. Trying to stay calm, I parked on the street, no small feat in our area where spots are hard to come by, then walked over and left a short, polite note. "Hi, this is private property. Please don't park here again." "Thanks." I slipped it under the windshield wiper and headed inside, heart racing from the surprise. My dad, who's in his late 70s and struggles with mobility, was staying with me. The whole reason I kept that driveway clear was so he could safely come and go. I collapsed onto the couch, hoping it was just a one-time mistake. But that SUV? It was just the beginning of something much worse. A few hours later, still groggy from my night shift, I stepped outside, and there it was. The SUV hadn't moved an inch. My note? Crumpled and tossed into the bushes like garbage. That's when my patience snapped. I had an appointment soon with my dad's doctor, and I needed the driveway clear in case he needed help walking out with his cane. Frustrated, I scribbled a second note, more direct this time. "This is private property. Do not park here. Final warning." I placed it squarely on the windshield, hoping they'd finally get the message. But of course, nothing ever goes that smoothly. The next morning, just as I was heading out for a quick grocery run, I stepped outside, and there it was again, that same SUV, bold as ever, sitting in my driveway like it belonged there. My final warning had been torn to shreds and scattered across the ground. I froze, adrenaline surging. I was done being polite. My elderly father needed safe, clear access to our home, and whoever was doing this clearly didn't care. Was this a neighbor's guest? A stranger treating my property like public space? I'd had it. It was time to put an end to this. The next morning, I finally gathered the courage to confront the person behind that SUV. I stepped outside early, eyeing the vehicle and wondering if I could get it legally towed without creating a scene. That's when someone stepped out from the house across the street. Karen, the freshly elected HOA president. She looked exactly like you'd expect. Sharp blonde bob, crisp white blouse, and a permanent scowl. I'd only heard about her through neighborhood gossip, overly strict, nitpicking tiny violations, and handing out warnings for things like slightly overgrown grass. Until now, I'd never interacted with her. Karen stormed toward me, her eyes locked on mine. "Why are you near my car?" she barked, her voice cutting through the quiet. I blinked. Her car? This was the woman who'd been blocking my driveway? I kept my voice steady. "This SUV belongs to you?" She folded her arms and gave a smug smile. "Yes. Street parking here is a nightmare, and I have important HOA matters. I use your driveway sometimes. What's the big deal? You're not using it every second." I clenched my jaw. "You're on private property, my property, without permission. I've left notes, and I have an elderly father who needs access." She scoffed. "I'm the HOA president. I know the rules. You don't own the street," she said, pointing toward my driveway. "If it mattered that much, you should have spoken to me earlier." My face flushed. "I tried." "You threw away every note." Karen just shrugged, slid into her SUV, and called over her shoulder. "If you want me to stop, you'll have to try harder than leaving scraps of paper." Then she slammed the door and peeled off. So that's who was running the HOA. My frustration boiled over into full-blown fury. For a few days, Karen actually kept her distance. I let myself believe, maybe too soon, that she'd finally gotten the message. My dad was relieved, too. No more struggling with his walker along the uneven curb. For once, things were quiet. But of course, it didn't last. Less than a week later, I pulled into the neighborhood after another exhausting shift at the hospital and stopped cold. Her SUV was not only back in my driveway, it was parked diagonally, completely blocking the accessibility ramp I'd installed for my dad. I saw red. I stormed across the street, heart hammering, and banged on her door like I was trying to wake the dead. The porch light flicked on. Karen opened it slowly, wearing a silk robe and an expression like I'd just ruined her evening facial. Her voice was flat. "What now?" "You blocked the ramp," I said, trying to stay calm. "My dad can't get out of the house." She blinked, then smirked. "Oh, that little metal thing? I thought it was junk. He can walk around it." I gritted my teeth. "He uses a walker. He's elderly. That ramp is the only safe way for him to leave." Karen scoffed, eyes narrowing. "Look, I'm sorry your crippled father is an inconvenience, but maybe he shouldn't be living in a neighborhood designed for people who actually have lives. Isn't there some kind of facility for people like him?" My stomach twisted. She leaned against the doorframe. "Honestly, it's a safety issue. For the rest of us. A man that fragile walking around here? It's only a matter of time before someone sues. Maybe I'm doing you a favor." My fists clenched at my sides. "Move the car." She rolled her eyes with the drama of a soap opera villain. "Fine, but here's the thing, sweetheart. Keep knocking on my door and I'll make sure your life becomes a checklist of violations. I am the HOA president. I know every rule in the book and how to bend them." Then, slam, door in my face. 5 minutes later, the SUV moved, but I just stood there in my driveway, staring at the glistening oil stains she'd left behind. My stomach churned, not just from anger, but from the weight of her words. This wasn't just about parking anymore. It was personal, and it was war. The next morning, during my dad's regular home nurse visit, we were mid-conversation about his blood pressure meds when a sudden thud echoed from the front yard. I walked to the window, and my stomach dropped. Karen was back. This time she wasn't just lurking. She stood at our mailbox like she owned the place, flipping through a thick stack of papers and slapping a neon pink notice right on the metal. I stepped outside, already bracing for madness, and she delivered. Taped to the mailbox was a bright pink sticker that read, "HOA violation, case 472B." And underneath it, a chaotic stack of papers. First, a formal citation accusing me of storing hazardous materials in my driveway because of a few oil stains. Then came a memo about new HOA rules for oil and chemical leaks, apparently updated just last month. There was also a notice saying I'd repeatedly failed to follow neighborhood maintenance standards, and that my property was now flagged for escalated non-compliance. But it didn't stop there. She'd included a pre-lien notice saying if I didn't pay the fines, the HOA could come after me financially by putting a lien on my home. And tucked in the back, a highlighted paragraph claiming my driveway was visually disruptive to community harmony. I stared at the mess of legal threats, codes, and bureaucratic nonsense, knowing full well every bit of it was because she parked in my driveway and left those stains herself. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, flipping through the layers of paper. Karen stood tall, smug as ever. "This is a formal notice of violation. Pursuant to Article 5, Section 2.3, and in compliance with Municipal Code 47 CCB, your driveway is out of standard. You have 7 days to remediate or face fines up to $1,000 under HOA Schedule 4F. "You caused the stains," I snapped. "That oil came from your car." She waved me off like I was a child interrupting a meeting. "Responsibility falls to the property owner under Addendum 14B, Clause E, page 6, footnote 2. You should have kept up." My hands were shaking. I turned to see my dad's nurse standing behind me, mouth slightly open. Karen didn't even acknowledge her, just spun around and marched off as if she'd just served a subpoena. I stood there, drowning in citations, acronyms, and municipal codes. It felt like the opening salvo of a bureaucratic war, one that wasn't meant to resolve anything but to exhaust me. But I wasn't backing down. If Karen wanted to quote subsections and clause numbers, I was about to bury her in certified letters, time-stamped logs, and an attorney who knew exactly how to make HOA board meetings uncomfortable. Let her try to pull Section 2.3 again. I'd be waiting with Article 8.4, Paragraph D, Clause 19, and a court date. She'd picked the wrong house to paper bomb. That afternoon, still seething, I called up an old college friend, Dan, now an attorney at a local firm who specialized in property disputes and HOA-related issues. After I laid out everything that had happened, he practically choked on his own disbelief. "This is straight-up trespassing," Dan said firmly. "She has absolutely no legal right to park on your driveway without your permission, regardless of her title. If it happens again, you're fully within your rights to have her towed." I hesitated. "But she's the HOA president," I said quietly. "She keeps threatening me with fines and penalties." Dan actually laughed. "HOA authority doesn't override private property law. She can't fine you for what happens on your own driveway. And if she's making threats, that crosses into harassment. Start documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, every incident. With proof, calling a tow truck is not only justified, it's smart. I've seen cases like this go south fast when people don't take action." That conversation flipped a switch in me. I'd tried being polite. I'd tried being direct. Karen had dismissed every attempt with arrogance and hostility. My dad's well-being was at risk, and the next time her SUV appeared in my driveway, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I didn't have to wait long. Just a few days later, I pulled into the neighborhood after a quick grocery run, and there it was again. Karen's SUV gleaming in the sunlight, parked smack in the middle of my driveway like it belonged to her. My father was expecting a home health aide that afternoon, and we needed clear access to the front entrance. That was the final straw. I already had a local tow company saved in my phone. I quickly snapped a few photos showing her vehicle on my property, blocking the walkway, then dialed. "Hi, I've got an unauthorized vehicle in my driveway," I said calmly, giving them my address. The tow truck arrived in record time. And honestly, watching them attach that SUV to the rig felt incredibly cathartic. My heart pounded with a cocktail of nerves and relief, but I knew I was doing exactly what needed to be done. She'd pushed me too far. Within 20 minutes, the SUV was gone. I stood by the window, bracing myself for Karen to come storming over, but she didn't. Not a sign of her. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled deeply, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this very public wake-up call would finally put an end to her entitled behavior. Later that evening, boom, 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 a furious pounding rattled my front door, nearly causing me to spill my drink. I knew exactly who it was. I opened the door to see Karen standing there, face flushed red with rage, gripping her phone like a weapon. "You towed my car?" she shrieked, practically shaking. Leaning casually against the doorframe, I stayed calm. "Yep, you parked in my driveway, again." Her chest rose and fell rapidly as she jabbed a finger at me. "That was illegal. I had important HOA documents inside. You can't just steal my car." I arched an eyebrow. "Illegal? No, you were trespassing. I gave you plenty of warnings." Her nostrils flared. "I am the HOA president. I was on official business. You had no right." I let out a sharp breath. "Being HOA president doesn't give you a reserved spot on my property. HOA rules don't override state law." Karen opened her mouth, searching for a comeback, but then, with a dramatic flare, she pulled out her phone. "Fine. I'm calling the police. You're harassing me." Her hands shook as she dialed. I gave a casual shrug. "Be my guest. I'll wait." 15 tense minutes later, 2 officers arrived. Karen ran toward them like reinforcements had just landed. "Officers! Thank God! He had my car towed for no reason. This is theft." The taller officer, Reynolds, raised a hand. "Ma'am, slow down. What exactly happened?" She pointed at me like I'd committed a felony. He took my car. I had to park in his driveway. There's never street parking. I have important HOA responsibilities and he's been harassing me. Reynolds turned to me. Sir, did you have the car towed? I nodded and showed them photos of her SUV repeatedly parked in my driveway. Reynolds barely glanced at Karen before replying, Ma'am, that's private property. He's within his legal rights to remove an unauthorized vehicle. Karen's face drained of color, then twisted in fury. No, I'm the HOA president. That's not fair. The second officer, Martinez, sighed. Ma'am, your title doesn't grant you the right to park on someone else's property. If you want your car back, you'll need to pay the towing fee. Karen gasped like someone had slapped her. Pay? You want me to pay for this? Reynolds folded his arms. That's how towing works. Her hands clenched as she snapped. This is a setup. You're siding with him. Martinez's expression hardened. You called us over a legal tow. If you file another false report, you could face charges. Her breath hitched. She knew she'd lost. Desperately, she turned to Reynolds again. So that's it? You're just letting him get away with this? He should be arrested. Don't you know who I am? I run this neighborhood. If I say someone's in violation, you listen. Reynolds didn't flinch. Ma'am, the law doesn't care who you are. He owns the driveway. He followed the law. Maybe you should try reading it instead of rewriting it. Karen looked like she might explode. She turned, glared daggers at me, and hissed, You'll regret this. It's not over. I gave her a smirk. I'm counting on it. She stormed off. The officers gave me a subtle nod and left. I closed the door behind them and finally let myself breathe. My driveway was Karen-free, at least for now. For about a week, Karen was nowhere to be seen near my driveway. She avoided me entirely, only sending sharp, bitter glances whenever we happened to cross paths outside. I let myself believe, foolishly, that it was finally over. With Karen seemingly out of the picture, I focused all my energy on caring for my dad, who had surgery coming up. Between his needs and my demanding hospital shifts, I was running on fumes. The last thing I needed was another conflict. But when someone thrives on chaos, peace never lasts long. One quiet Saturday morning, I got up ready to take my dad to a follow-up appointment. I pulled open the curtains and froze. Karen's SUV was back in my driveway. Worse, a second car, a compact sedan, was parked directly behind it, boxing me in completely. I rushed outside, heart pounding with a mix of fury and disbelief. My dad's appointment was in 2 hours. I didn't have time for Karen's games. The second vehicle likely belonged to a friend or relative of hers, but what made her think she could turn my driveway into her personal parking lot? From the front door, my father appeared, leaning on his walker. Everything all right, son? I clenched my fists and forced a steady breath. Karen's pulled another stunt. 2 cars this time. He shook his head, frustrated. That woman has no sense of boundaries. I wrapped an arm around his shoulders. It's okay. I'll take care of it. I tried knocking on Karen's door. Nothing. I called out, even checked with a nearby neighbor, but no one had seen her. Either she was hiding or genuinely not home. Regardless, I couldn't wait around. My father needed a clear path to get to the car. Dan's words rang in my ears. You're legally allowed to tow any unauthorized vehicle on your property. So that's exactly what I did. I called the same tow company, explained the situation. This time, there were 2 vehicles blocking my driveway. The dispatcher chuckled, clearly remembering our last conversation. We'll send 2 trucks right away, they said. Within half an hour, both trucks arrived. The drivers took one look at the situation and shook their heads, clearly baffled at the level of entitlement. They secured Karen's SUV first, then the sedan. I felt a surge of anxiety. Karen wasn't going to take this lightly, but also a deep sense of relief. She'd shown no regard for my boundaries or for my dad's health. This had to stop. As the trucks pulled away with both vehicles, the moment felt almost unreal. My hands trembled with leftover adrenaline, but deep down, I felt justified. Karen could twist the story however she wanted. Facts were facts. And this time, the law was firmly on my side. The meltdown hit exactly 2 hours later, right on cue. I was helping Dad finish his physical therapy in the living room when a car screeched to a stop outside. I looked out the window and saw Karen storming up the driveway, her face contorted with rage, phone clutched to her ear. I stepped onto the porch, ready for the inevitable explosion. "Where is my car?" she screamed, voice cracking, finger jabbing toward me like a weapon. "Both of your cars were towed," I said flatly. "You parked on private property, again." I'm done being patient. Her face froze for a beat, then twisted into disbelief. You can't, how dare you? I'm the HOA president. This is harassment. I'm calling the police." She started pacing frantically, rambling into her phone about being targeted, her words a jumble of outrage and spit. My dad, watching from the doorway, just shook his head. When the police arrived, yes, the same 2 officers as before, Karen rushed toward them, gesturing wildly. "He's had my cars towed, twice! That can't be legal! Arrest him!" The taller officer sighed and turned to me. "Got photos again?" I nodded, holding up my phone. "Both cars, on my property, blocking access, no permission." "Just like last time," the officer muttered before facing Karen. "Ma'am, as we explained before, he's within his rights to remove unauthorized vehicles from his own driveway." Karen's face contorted. "But I'm the HOA president." "That doesn't give you the right to park wherever you please," the officer replied calmly. That's when the real breakdown began. She started shouting that I was ruining her life, threatening me with HOA violations, promising I'd regret this for the rest of my days. The officers, visibly over it, just stood silently, letting her wear herself out while filling out the paperwork. I didn't say a word, just stood there with my arms crossed as she hurled every accusation she could muster. But her fury peaked the moment she realized both cars were already at the impound lot. She'd have to pay the full towing and storage fees. Twice. I had never seen someone unravel so completely. She was trembling, her face crimson, eyes brimming with frustrated tears. But there was nothing she could do. The officers remained professional. "No crime was committed," one of them said as they prepared to leave. And just like that, they drove off, leaving Karen in full meltdown mode, alone in the middle of my driveway she no longer controlled. Karen locked eyes with me, voice shaking. "I hope you're happy," she snapped, stepping closer. "You've made an enemy you can't handle." I didn't respond. My heart pounded, but I stood my ground. I hadn't started this. I'd only defended my home and my father. Her phone rang, probably the tow yard. She glanced at the screen, muttered a curse, and looked back at me. For a second, beneath the fury, I saw it, the realization she couldn't win this. She opened her mouth, then thought better of it. Without another word, she spun around and stormed off, shoulders rigid with rage. I stood there, silent, watching her disappear down the sidewalk. And in that moment, I knew. This war wasn't over, but it had finally shifted in my favor. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. I'd love to hear from you. What city are you watching this story from? Drop it in the comments below.